Hey guys!
Welcome to Bookish Banter, where we utilize the Socratic method to push the boundaries of conversation about the important topics of literature.
Today, we're talking about George Orwell's 1984 and some of the major themes and questions that come of it.
Specifically, we're going to be talking about the neutralization of the proletariat via language control and the manipulation of history. Our first topic is language control. The first question is, how does the limitation of language decrease the ability to communicate complicated or even unagreeable ideas?
I would say that limiting language limits people's ability to articulate their true feelings. Specifically in 1984, strong feelings are what make people do things that they don't really want, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it was earlier that you pointed out that Newspeak is almost like a second language to those speakers who knew the English before Newspeak. So, how would that impact their ability to convey their emotions?
I would say that the limitation of newspeak makes it to where you have things that you want to say, but you don't have the means to really be able to articulate it in the way that you really mean to. And I mean that by saying, like, yeah, you can pass the same kind of concept of what you're saying, but feelings are so much more deep than understanding the concept. It's really hard to be able to know what you're trying to say because a lot of the times you're restricted to what you know, and it's often you're limited by your ability to translate that word into English. But if you completely don't have that word, you're just restricted to being able to say, for example, more good instead of better, even though better is a better way of articulating that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I believe that whenever a language simplifies its verbiage so often, it can leave people feeling like they have a vacuum almost, or like a missing part where they don't have a word to fill the need that they need to that they need to convey.
Yeah, totally. And I think of this like in our experience with Spanish and English that Spanish has more powerful words for I love you.
Yes.
And in English, we can only say I love you to the moon and back or something to that effect to make the our love more grandiose, to make it more impactful. But because we don't have a word for that. And I mean, it's frustrating really not having a word for a feeling, especially a feeling so common as that.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because the two versions of I love you that I know of course, is te quiero and then te amo. And one of those would be like a casual, like, oh, I love you so much.
Yeah.
And then there's one where it means I love you.
Yeah.
Like all of you, romantically, everything.
Yeah.
And just like to not have a word for that in English is just like, it does leave like a vacuum. Like there's
It's
something
limiting.
missing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are really good points.
And furthermore, with that first bit that I mentioned, that strong feelings can only truly be articulated whenever you have verbiage to be able to articulate it with. And I feel like that's the whole point of 1984's Newspeak, is to be able to restrict these more impactful feelings so you are easier to control. Like you can only start a revolution if you know the word revolution, if you know how to convey your dissatisfaction with the way that things are currently going. I know in the book that they specifically say that you'll never, I think that they say that you will not be able to say bad because you'll just say less good or not good. And not good and bad are not the same. Not good and horrible are not the same.
It's pointed out multiple times throughout the book that their society is based on hate instead of love. And I believe that is shown in Winston whenever he hates this dark-haired girl basically without even knowing her. And then it immediately flips on a dime to, I love her, as soon as she expresses feelings of love to him. So I feel like this lack of language also leads to a lower emotional intelligence. Next question. Is social media censorship akin to that of newspeak? How is it different?
I feel like the gut reaction is to be like, no, they're completely different because social media censorship can be good, newspeak bad, but they are really similar because in the probably a broader sense that it is a entity restricting people's ability to say stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly really brave of you to say, because most people would be like, no, those are totally different. Those are totally different. And I don't know why you're even comparing them, because one helps people and one doesn't help people. And I would agree with you. They are very similar. However, I think the next question to ask is, who are they protecting with each of them? So when you think of, like, say, hate speech on social media, when you take that away, who are you protecting?
On removing hate speech, it's trying to protect those marginalized groups that do have hate speech directed towards them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with new speech, or new speak rather, it's about protecting the oligarchy.
Yes, exactly.
It's about protecting the upper class.
Mm-hmm. Next question. Is the censorship of hate speech, which is illegal in some countries and restricted in our own, the same as the enforcement of newspeak?
I would say that yes, for all the same reasons we covered in the previous question. Maybe even to a further degree because these are both government entities that we're talking about rather than the social media platform being a or a private entity rather.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever it comes down to a private entity such as like a social media platform, the individuals are choosing to be a part of it, but in a government sense, you're not really choosing to be a part of it. So you are adopted a part of that restriction whether you like it or not.
Yeah, like whenever you join a social media, you agree to their terms and conditions. But whenever you're born in a country or like in a totalitarian oligarchy, you don't really agree to that. You're just existing. Okay, so in our country, which is the United States of America, hate speech isn't illegal. However, it is kind of curtailed. Hate speech is not allowed as long as there's a call to action of violence. Do you believe that that is okay?
Obviously, I think we should stop the intent to cause violence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that necessarily.
But it is an infringement on free speech. I think in the end, you just have to think that there are nuances to things, and there's no hard and fast rules. Mm-hmm. It's not black and white. It is a gray spectrum.
I feel like, at least in the context of the First Amendment, like you were saying, that the hate speech is only illegal if there's a call to action of violence.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's more about the violence than it is the hate speech, though.
You could say that it is a form of hate speech, though, in itself, because they have not yet committed the violent crime.
It's always so hard whenever it comes down to a government entity, like a single entity, really restricting stuff like this, because it is so subjective, really. Because my belief, what a hate speech term isn't that of whoever else.
Yeah, that's very true. So would you say that we'd be more at like an equilibrium? Like, would you be more okay with the policing of hate speech if it was deemed hate speech or not by democracy?
I want to say that, but then I think about like in the 60s or something, like at the dawn of civil rights, that I know that there's plenty of stuff that would have been passed as being legal to say that we absolutely would disagree with.
Yeah, and that's why I think that the education of citizens is so important. And that's why the Department of Education should not be shut down.
Or defunded, rather.
Or defunded, yes.
But
But yeah, I think that's a really good path to go down. I think those are really good thoughts. And I hope you guys can think on that. Leave a comment if you have an opinion on that.
yeah, I'd love to hear about anybody's opinion. Like,
Yeah, because this was a really tough question.
yeah, there's not a lot of clear answers, and like, obviously, I feel a certain kind of way, but that doesn't always. I'm not the perfect opinion.
No, exactly.
I think I am, but
Well,
I'm not.
glad, yeah. No, you should always think that you have a flawed opinion and you should always be open-minded to change. So, now with that out of the way, the next topic is the manipulation of history. So the first question is, does this cause the repetition of bad history?
100% it does. We're doomed to fall in a cycle of repetition if we just wipe away what happened beforehand. And it might not be in our lifetimes, but all of recorded history needs to stay recorded so because likely somebody has suffered in the past, and we need to be able to keep the history of that so somebody in the future doesn't suffer for that same action.
That is such a lovely way of putting that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind for me is the atrocious actions of the U.S. government towards the Native American and indigenous peoples of North America. They have been oppressed for centuries now through slavery, through segregation, through cultural genocide, and more. It is completely abhorrent. I believe that we should be teaching this in schools, in colleges, universities, everywhere on the news. People need to know about this so that we can prevent it from happening in the future, because it is still happening right now.
And atop that is another topic, the issue of gun violence is the exact same thing.
Yes, exactly.
That people want to continue to believe that things aren't as bad as they seem, and people grow numb to history and overlook things because it can't be that bad. It's just a number on a page. And yes, like, that is not intentionally manipulating, but if you start to drop pieces of history in favor of an idea that you feel is more favorable in your brain, then it's not going to amount to change ever.
Yes, I completely agree.
I also feel that we need to start assigning general misinformation in the same nature as we do of manipulation of history.
Yes, exactly. And with the introduction of AI, it has just run rampant on social media. And with no fact checkers on social media now, it is just atrocious.
People go on believing anything at this point. Like, it doesn't have to have any scientific backing to it. It doesn't even have to have anybody like trustworthy saying it. It just has to appear in a article that looks relatively professional.
Like, you can just show somebody an Onion article and they'll be like, yeah, that seems legit.
And I know that whenever we were kind of preparing for this, that you were talking about the way that people look at the Holocaust, that obviously it was due to the Nazi regime, and how most people, I'd like to think a very large, I wish everybody, would say that it is one of the biggest atrocities in history. But we don't really see it the same with the genocide of the Native American. And it's really tragic because it almost feels more intimate as an American that, like, yeah, like, our country did that. Like, obviously I'm not saying one is worse than the other, but they should be spoken in the same like conversation anyway.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. So speaking of the Holocaust, due to some social media misinformations, there's a large amount of people now that don't believe that over 6 million Jewish people died in the Holocaust, which is absurd because it's highly documented, very thorough, because the Nazis were very proud of what they did, and we have those documentations, and there's just Holocaust deniers now. It is ridiculous, it's bizarre, it is insane. And that goes exactly right into why the acknowledgement of history is so important in the avoidance of repeating it. Because we are doomed, absolutely doomed to repeat it, because we are going to fall for the same tactics that those totalitarian dictatorship leaders used to get into power so that they could force their ideals onto people like that.
Mm-hmm. And while we are on the topic, I did want to rope it a little bit back more into the context of the book and how specifically with O'Brien and how he says that history is what the party, the collective determines it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of leads into ideas about like, what is it, survivor's bias?
Yes.
That the victor of a war or whatever it may be gets to determine what actually happened there.
Mm-hmm. It's a strange tangent, but that's also one reason why you should look to your elders for memories of older times, because they have a first-person experience in things that you can only read in history books now.
And you don't always have to agree with their perspective.
No,
but getting their perspective is valuable.
But talking to your grandparents about seeing the civil rights movement, wow, that's powerful, you know?
Like my grandma being an early feminist, like that's a unique perspective that she has. Memories are valuable.
Memories are valuable. And that's why we should spread them. Alrighty. Next question. Winston recounts a time when he had proof of an alteration of history. He then states that if it happened again, something good would come from it. Would the next time really be different? Why or why not?
I don't think so. I think that he was obviously hopeful. Throughout the whole book, he's really hopeful that he can be the one to make the change in the government, that he can abolish the party.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, that's out of his reach. That's why he goes to the Brotherhood. But even if in the best scenario he was able to do something with it, I believe that the people of Oceania are way too far down that path to be able to look at what he has and be like, oh yeah, you're right. Big Brother is wrong. And I really reflect on the bit at the end or close to the end, where Big Brother says that they had 500,000 prisoners of war or whatever. And Big Brother truly can say anything. And people are like, praise Big Brother. That what would we do without Big Brother? And it can literally say anything.
Yes, that is a really good point. And I believe that if the people discovered that there was a almost like a doublethink or a mismatch of history, they would simply blame Goldstein.
Absolutely.
Just like whenever they were like, we have we hate Eurasia signs, and then they were like, oh, it's actually East Asia, and we've always been at war with East Asia, and then they're looking at their signs, and they're like, oh, that Goldstein.
Like literally anything is like can be blamed on Goldstein.
He's literally like, what is the word for it?
Scapegoat.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. He is definitely just a scapegoat. Like, he is the devil. Like, the people of 1984 put all of the bad things of the world onto the scapegoat. And they push him out into the wilderness to never be seen again.
Yeah.
Okay, so I felt like that question actually had two possible answers for it. You kind of had the large scale answer where it was about the people receiving the information. I was thinking more about the small scale answer. So, whenever Winston actually would receive another alteration of history, do you believe that he would actually do something with it? Or do you believe that he would be hopeless just like last time and burn it?
He definitely would not have done anything with it. He always expected that, or always wanted somebody else to make the jump for him. He always wanted the brotherhood to be real. He always wanted somebody else to really make change in the world and it not be him.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I don't know. I think that he probably wouldn't have done anything differently. I think he probably would have followed the status quo. But he was kind of riding a high with Julia during some point of the book. So he may or may not have brought it to Julia and shown her, but Julia probably would have talked him down out of it because Julia didn't have that want to cause huge societal change.
Until she did. Because of him.
Because of him, yes.
Well, thanks for following our conversation on the neutralization of the proletariat via language control and the manipulation of history. If you had any thought-provoking moments that you'd like to share with us, please drop them down in the comments. If you really enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Do you have anything else?
Yes, we will be enforcing newspeak in the comments, so no hate, please. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Please drop a like if you enjoyed it, and if you really enjoyed it, please hit subscribe. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.